Everyone thinks they're not crazy.
I have carpal tunnel.
We're all
I
in
have
the same
two
boat.
operations on my shoulders. I have a cataract operation to get.
Oh boy.
Just found out I have carpal tunnel. Be a lot worse, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, we're holding today Daf Yomi Dalet Amud Aleph. Towards the top, there's two dots there. It's a Tanur Rabbana. Thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. In the schus of our learning, we should have Beis Hamikdash.
Yeah.
It starts like this. Tanur Rabbanan. Says Shorshav Masayim Shanagach Shorshav Masayim. We have an ox. It's worth 200 coins, 200 zuz. And of course, another ox it's worth 200 zuz. So this is equal equal value. Okay. Turned out it didn't damage it entirely. It only damaged it 50 coins worth of damage. So it still has a value of 150. It was 200, now it's only 150. However, something happened. I don't know exactly how to explain this, but Vamad al Arba Me'azuz. Then the price went up of the animals, livestock, and now it's worth 400 zuz. Now, the reason why this is mentioning this is maybe we'd say that there's actually no damage. However, Shalmali, I don't know if to add the word like. There's two ways to spell Umali with the aleph or Umali with the yud. Umali with an aleph, it means if not for. And then usually you leave out the word loy. But if you do Umali with the yud, it means if only. Yeah. Very cool. That's right. So Umali loy or Umali with the aleph, then you leave out the loy. If only, if not for that hizika, if not for the damage, then it would have been 800. So there still is a damage here. You can't claim that there's no damage. There is a damage. But the rule is, nice and kshas and nezek, he only has to pay exactly what happened at the time of the damage, which is just 50 coins. And since this was a short time, he only has to pay 25 coins. Follow? A good deal. Kichesh, let's say instead of the price of livestock going up, it actually went down. So then you don't pay for the time of damage, you have to pay for its value at the time when you stand in court. It's very interesting. A little inconsistent here. Because if you would pay for the difference in price, and the damage would have been 400 zuz.
It was the opposite of what was the price went up, there you had to pay more, and then it went down, you still get the same.
Right. Shabach mazik. Let's say the mazik got worth the damaging animal got worth more. Now, what's going on now is one detail here is that when a shor mazik, when a shor tam, when a tame animal causes damage, the victim gains part of that animal according to Rabbi Akiva. And according to Rabbi Shmuel, he doesn't. We had a machlokes yesterday, Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. Does he actually take the animal itself, or does he just get a value equivalent to half of it or whatever? Now, is that Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva or Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir? That was Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. That was back over here. So, Shavach Mazik, if the animal got worth more, the damaging animal got worth more, so we don't say that because he owns 25, it's not 25%, it's 1/8 of that animal, because the animal is worth 200. He owns 1/8 of that animal. He owns 25 of a 200 animal. So we should say that now that it's increased in price, Now he owns a little bit more in that animal, more than 25, because that he was a partial partner in that. It's like Shasanezik. He doesn't gain because as if like he has stocks in it and the stocks go up and then he owns he gets the dividends and that type of thing. That doesn't work like that. But let's say it gets worth less, then he actually loses out. He doesn't still get 25. He's going to get less. Let's say it's only now worth his portion, whatever, is 24. It's only going to get 24, 20, whatever. Amar Mar. Okay, we're going to go back to analyze this brisa we started with the Tana Rabbanan. So the master taught Shavach. Is it Shavach? Shivach. Shavach Mazik. The Mazik, the damaging animal got worth more. Nice and Kshasa Nezek. We said that he has to pay. The victim gets the amount that he was deserving at the time of the damage. He doesn't get the increase in the profit of what now that it's worth more. Now, Mani, which opinion is this? Rabbi Shmuel, it's the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel. You see, Rabbi Shmuel held that the victim does not own the actual animal. He just has a debt that the guy owes him. So it's just money. So he owes him money. So it has nothing to do with the increase of this animal, increase of price.
Why would the price go up?
That I don't know.
Somewhere.
I don't know. Yeah, it's the market thing.
Right.
They just found out in research that milk is not a good diet, and everyone should be eating meat, and so the price shoots up. Got milk?
How we learned yesterday about the lien. When something has a lien, like usually the lien price doesn't change according to the value of the item.
Lien.
For 20.
Right, that's right.
That's how Rabbi
But
Akiva
according
was.
to Rabbi Kiva held that it was more than a lien. Kiva held it becomes a partner. Yeah. Rabbi Shmuel says that it's a lien. Yeah. So this is Rabbi Shmuel's opinion. Let's go further. If it gets worth less, whose animal got worth less? It's a mixture. They're partners, so he has to pay him the amount that it was at the time of Hamad Badin standing in court. Asam Rabbi Akiva. This follows the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, the Amar Shutfininu, that says that they're partners. So it's a problem. Reish Rabbi Shmuel say for Rabbi Akiva. Comes out that in this one brisa, I have one part of it that fits with Rabbi Shmuel that says that the victim does not own any part of the perpetrating ox. And then I have the other part that says, like Rabbi Akiva, which says that he's a partner in it, and when it gets worth less, he takes the loss. Umar says, like, don't worry about that. It's not the way it's supposed to be like. Kula Rabbi Akiva, the whole thing is really Rabbi Akiva. Talking about over here that the perpetrator actually fattened up his ox. He's like, good going, when he got into that fight. So he fattens him up. And because he made it worth more by fattening it up, that increase does not go to the victim. He used his own food to fatten it up. That's his increase. He increased it, and therefore the victim doesn't gain anything from that increasing. So even according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that he's a partner in this animal, but if one of the partners fattens it up, then all of that only belongs to that partner.
So you can be partners in an animal.
It's partners in an animal.
So what is that? So if one of the partners lets him out, because he's the only one that pays.
It would depend on who would be the one that needs to guard it. It's a good point.
Oh.
That would probably depend on that.
I'm sorry.
That's a good point.
Go ahead.
Ika Shapitmai, Gemara asks, if we're talking about that there was one individual that did this, talking about the perpetrator that fattened him up. Hey, Marisha, let's go back to an earlier case. It says, Shavach Mamad al Dal Me'ezuz, listen like Shas and Nezek. We would like the brisa to be consistent with what the story is. He said that if there was an increase of in the victim's animal, it went up, even though when it got originally it was worth 200. When it got gored, it was worth 150. But then immediately after that, it got worth 400. So we said, how did it get worth 400? It should be consistent with what it said later. How did the other one get worth more? Because the perpetrator fattened it up. How did this get worth more? Because the victim fattened it up. Besides, it was a little ill, it was bruised, wounded. So he gave him extra food. So he fattened him up. It's not just the supply and demand. It's because he actually worked on it to make him worth more. You're trying to tell me that there's a possibility that maybe the perpetrator doesn't have to pay anything because now he's worth more. What are you talking about? He's worth more because because after all of the what do they do after the hospital in the recovery places in the rehab? Because in the rehab they that's not because of the victim. That's not because of the perpetrator. That's because of the rehab. Because he got fattened up over there. So Amar of Papa says we're talking about in the first case where the victim gets worth more. It actually doesn't matter which one. We want to say the same halacha. Whether the price went up because of supply and demand, whether the price went up because of the rehab that he was convalescent. He was being treated so well. So it's Lashminan and the chiddush over there. You're right. The chiddush would be only when it got worth more because of supply and demand. Could have thought that maybe there's really no damage here because look, immediately afterwards it got worth more. So it was only worth 200 before. Now it's worth 400. Right. So nice and like Shas and Nezik. Nevertheless, he has to pay for the damage, which was 50 coins. Seifa, but in the end, that would only apply to when he actually fattened it up. So the ratio, not yeah. What would happen in the Seifa if it said over there that was talking about when the mazik gets worth more? The mazik, the animal of the mazik, of the damager gets worth more. So why doesn't the nizik gain some of that increase? So that's because it got worth more only because he fattened it up. If it gets worth less, then he gets like it is at the time of the court. This is talking about the victim. Why did it get worth less? Are you talking about that the guy gets this ox gets rammed by another ox, and then he's the owner says, okay, back to work, and it gets worth less. So we say kshasam adabadin. Says leimale at makresh v'ana yehivna. He says you made it worth less, and I have to pay for that. You should have let it rest for a day before you take it back to work. Ravashi, the kichas machmasmaka. Ravashi says it got worth less because of the injury. Damarle, the guy tells him, Karna de Turach Kavirabe, still has the horn from your ox is still buried inside my ox. So that's what made him worth less. And then that's why he still has to pay at the time, up until the time of in court. That's still considered part of the same damage. What is that? What is rebuilt? What is that?
When they do a car, the total loss, they sell it in the auction, then when someone buys it and fixes it up, they get never worth the same.
Okay. Shar Shava Masayim Shanagach Shar Shava Masayim Beina Neveli Yafaklum. So to your car analogy, this ox was totaled. So you had a ox that's worth 200, goes an ox that's worth 200, and it's totaled. It's not worth anything afterwards.
When an animal is killed by a horn or some accident, you can't eat the meat, right? Because that just be shut.
Can't eat the meat,
Right. So
but an animal
useless.
could eat the meat, use it for dog food or whatever.
The skin or something.
Yeah. So
here was it a tam or a?
This is a tam. We're dealing with the tam. Amar Reb Meir. Reb Meir says, Reb Meir says this is exactly what the pasuk means, that you sell the living ox and you divide the money. Because by
the damage. The damaging.
The damaging perpetrator. Yeah. Sell the one that's still alive, and you divide the money. Why do you divide the money? Because the damage was 200. The living ox, the perpetrator, the mazik, is worth 200. So because the mazik has to pay chatzi nesek, so he pays 100 to this guy, and he keeps 100. So you sell it, and it's exactly what each one needs, 100. Okay, because he pays half price. Amali Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says to Rabbi Meir, there's a discussion here between two students of Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Lai, of course. Amali Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, "V'chein halacha." He says, Rabbi Meir, you're right. That's the halacha. However, you didn't learn the pasuk correctly. Because but you got one half of the verse correct. That you sell the living ox and you divide the value, you divide the money. But if you look further, the pasuk says, and you also have to divide the carcass.
There's no muad here, so
It's not
that's
a
why
muad.
it's divided.
Yeah. You have to divide the carcass. So that means that the victim and the perpetrator divide the living ox, and they also divide the victim's ox, the dead one. Each one gets half of half. Half of each. And
But if
everyone
he
gets half of
stands
each.
nothing to gain from the carcass, then why do they divide?
So that must be that when the pasuk says "V'gamas ames yachadson," it's not talking about a case when it's worth nothing. It's talking about another case.
So
Let's see what case that is. Ve'eza, what case would that be? This is talking about an ox that's worth 200. Of course, another ox that's worth 200. And the carcass is worth 50. So what's 200 minus 50? The value, the damage here was a 150 value, was 150 damage, 150 loss. Huh?
But you had a trick question. Of course.
So Chazenaitel Chatzi Achai, Bachatzi Ames. Chazenaitel Chatzi Achai, Bachatzi Ames.
He's engaging us.
That's one.
Give him another chance. So that each one takes half of the living and half of the dead. Okay, so now let's just explain what happened there. So the living one is worth 200, right? So if they each divide the living one, they're going to get 100 each. Easy. The damaging one is worth 50. They divide the damaging one, then not the damaged one, the victim, it's worth 50. Then they'll each get 25. So together they have 125. Now, what was the loss of the victim? What did he lose? He lost 150. So what does he have now? Well, originally he had he had 200. Now he only has 50. So when we divide half of each, he ends up with 125. So his loss is 75, which is half of what the damage was, which was 150. So he actually gets paid half the damage. How does he get paid half the damage? By getting 125, 100 from the living ox and 25 from the carcass. And the other guy loses 75 also. He has 100 plus 25.
Pasuk in Shemos is referring to both the live ox and the carcass. So they derive it from there.
Yeah, that's Rabbi Yehuda's view. Rabbi Yehuda derives it from there.
So in this case, the damage party comes out better than how we done it before. How we done it before was that the carcass was 50, the damage party keeps it 50, and then the damager would give him like the other 50, 200. In this case, it's a ton.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be no. They would get the same amount. According to Reb Meir, how would we do this in this case? We would say that the nevela belongs to the nizik. Okay, so what's the damage? The damage is 150. So he's going to take 75 from the living ox.
In this
That's it.
He gets 125. And then
But in other cases, but according to that, he also gets 125. 50. The carcass is worth 50 plus 75 from the perpetrator.
Why 75, not 100?
Because his damage was only 150. So he divide the 150 in half to 75.
So, okay, so really just the
It's only Chatzi Nezek. He's only getting Chatzi Nezek. Half the price.
I guess
We have two ways
I
of doing
thought you
it.
just simply take the animal of the mazik and you split it, and he gives him 100. So now the nizak has 150.
And that's more than half Chatzi Nezek.
His thing was 200. His is 200, so he gives him half of them.
No, but it has to equal the Chatzi Nezek. Has to be the Chatzi Nezek. Yeah, the Gemara is going to have a Havamina to do it what you're saying, but we'll see soon. It's not going to play out like that.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because it says Makros Ashorachai
Right?
That's
And
it.
now
So
that
now-
would only be in a case where the damage was a full 200 and the Sharachai is 200, so then you just divide
Yeah,
it.
it says et hashorachai, so I think it's just a living.
Right. But the problem is, the pasuk goes on and says, V'gamas amitz yechetzan.
So that's the
And
machlokes.
also the dead one you divide.
So according to Rav Meir, you would get 100.
No, according to Rav Meir, you also only get 125. Why? Because according to Rav Meir, in the case that Rav Meir says Machros Ashar Chai is when the damage is 200. That's when a Machros Ashar Chai. But if the
And the Nevela has
damage
no
is not,
value.
and the Nevela has no value. But if the damage is only 150, so then you're just going to get Chatzi Nezek, which doesn't fit perfectly with that pasuk. Pasuk was giving me an example of when everything added up perfectly.
scenario, both divide both animals. Before, as I understood it was that the damaged party keeps the carcass, and then the damager gives him the difference. In this case, we'll keep the
That's Rav
carcass.
Meir's view. Good. Rav Yehuda's view.
But he makes less. He gets less amount because he only gets half of his item, which is 100, and in this case, he's getting 125.
No, so 1 second. Let's go back to Rav Meir's view. There's an ox that's worth 200. Of course, an ox is worth 200, and it's the carcass is worth 50. According to Rav Meir, he keeps the carcass. What's the difference in the damage between what it was originally and now? It's 150. The original he lost 150. So now he goes to the perpetrator. He says, "You owe me 75 from the living ox."
Because this is the case of your moon.
No, it's a time. No, it's a time.
Why does he have to pay him full? Wasn't it half?
He said 150 is the damage because it was from 200 down to 50. There's a difference of 150. 150 and half is 75. So he goes to the perpetrator. He says, "You owe me 75 from the living ox." Okay, so what's his total now? 75 plus 50 is 125. That's Rabbi Meir's view. Rabbi Yehuda's view is that we take the living ox, we divide it in half. So 100. We take the victim and we divide it in half. That's 25. Each one takes half of each, and this one gets 125 and this one gets 125. In the end, how much do they each have? 125. Whether we follow Rabbi Meir or whether we follow Rabbi Yehuda, it's the same thing. It's just the question is, do you keep the whole victim ox or do you divide the victim ox in half? That's the machlek. I'm sorry.
That's the only
That's the machlek. Okay. Let's start the Gemara. Tan Rabbanan was taught in the Brisa. Shor Shavim Masayim, Shanagach Shor Shavim Masayim. By the way, if you don't get this clear at the beginning, the rest of this page is going to be very confusing to you because it's going to throw things. There's going to be a lot of numbers throwing out. I should have brought some 2 oxen with price tags on them.
We could use the cover.
So yeah, I have an ox that's worth 200. Like Shanagach Shor Shavim Masayim.
Which one is
I don't know which one is the victim over here. It looks like they're damaging each other. The black one is the victim.
Yeah.
That's historically. Is that how it works?
In the month of
Uh-huh. Okay.
Which is the Chodesh of Shor.
So Shenagach Shoshav Masayim. I'm familiar with this example. We had this in the Mishnah according to Rabbi Yehuda. This one takes half of the living one and half of the dead one. This one takes half the living one, half of the dead one. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says is what the pasuk is referring to. So each one ends up with 125 because they divided each the living one, which was 100, and the carcass, which was 50. So they each which is now 25 each. Rameir says, that's not the case of what the pasuk is referring to. Ella shorshav masayim shnagel shorshav masayim and veil yafe klum. We're talking about when the ox is totaled, when it was worth 200, and now it's worth 0, and you say you divide the living ox. According to the Rabbi Yehuda's case, you didn't really divide the living ox. Oh, you did divide the living ox, but you're also dividing the carcass. That's only different. In his case, he divided the living ox into 100 each. And the Rebbe says no. There's only division of the living ox into 100 each. So what does the pasuk say that you also divide the carcass? Also the carcass you divide. Doesn't mean the carcass. Rebbe Meir says. What became worth less through the death, you divide it in the living one. It's not that you divide the carcass, the dead one. Not that you divide the dead one. Whatever got worth less in the dead one, you divide it in the living one. So he's reading into this pasuk, not the literal reading. It's not that you divide the dead one. It's whatever begam es hameis, and also the carcass yechetsun bechai. You divide it. Gets divided by the living one, the price for the dead one. Okay. Gemara says mechti. 1 second. Bein Rab Meir, Bein Rab Yehuda, Hai Meir Vesem Chamishim Shekel, Hai Meir Vesem Chamishim Shekel. According to both of them, they each get 125. So my benaya, what's the difference between them? It's a classical argument in court, where they and we've had this actually in the Din Torah, where the people came in there arguing like crazy, and they're arguing, and it turns out that it was just about the same thing. And at one point, the Dayanim said, this whole thing is you're arguing over, $10,000 or something. It started with like huge numbers, and then, but you agree to that. So why don't you just take you take a loss of 5,000 and pay the other, and just let's get out of here. They said, okay, fine. Or else, we can do all the research, look through all the papers. It's going to take a long time, So
I've seen it the other way, where each side ended up with like $500,000 of attorney's fees.
That happens in divorce cases. It happens like that. That's where they lose everything. It's terrible. Yeah. So, if they would have just given the other person everything that they asked for, they would have made more money. Yeah. Amarava chas nevela kabinayu. Rava says we're talking about the chas, if the carcass gets worth less. So who owned the carcass? According to Rabbi Yehuda, there was a partnership in the carcass because they had to divide it. According to Rabbi Meir, it's only that loss would only be for the victim because he owns the whole thing. Rabbi Meir savar chas nevel denizakavi. Rabbi Meir says that it only belongs to the victim. He owns the whole carcass. Rabbi Yehuda savar chas nevel demazakavi palga.
So he owns the whole.
So when it gets worth less, so from the time of the damage to the time of selling the carcass, when it gets worth less, we say that that's your loss. Our damage, that's the nizik's loss. The damage that the mazik did was only 150 or whatever. Now it's worth less. That's your loss. That was your animal. That was your carcass. Maybe sell it faster next time or whatever. That's your loss. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, that he owns half of it. So they each take part of that loss.
If the carcass is valued at the time of the accident.
Yeah.
Then that could happen, but if the carcass is valued at the time that the court is into the ruling, that doesn't happen. It's whatever it's worth at the moment.
How did we go over here? We said if it gets worth less, we said it was kashas amad badin. Yeah, maybe it's at the time, the difference between the time of the court case and the time of selling. Let's go from there. Okay. Amalei Abaya. Who's Abaya talking to? Rava. He's talking to Rava. Rava explained that the difference between Rabbi and Rabbi Yehuda is pchas nevela, is if it gets worth less. Abaya says in Cain, if so, Matina Rabbi Yehuda comes out according to Rabbi Yehuda, tam chomer mimur, that a short tam, a tame ox, is more strict than a forewarned ox. Why? Because who needs to take care of the carcass? According to Rabbi Meir, the victim has to take care of the carcass. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's the perpetrator also has to take care of the carcass. By a muad, it's clearly the victim takes care of the carcass. By not the perpetrator. Over here, by the time the perpetrator owns part of the carcass, he ends up having to deal with the loss of whatever the carcass is. It comes out that he ends up taking a loss, whatever the possibly taking a loss, then more than it would be if it would be a muad, because now he has to deal with the carcass. If we would say, so what? Big deal. That happens sometimes. Kedetanan, as we even have a Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Tam Chayv Muad Pater. Rabbi Yehuda says, this is a Mishnah in one of the prakim later in the next parak. There's an interesting thing. The responsibility to watch your animal is that you have to close the gate. And the gate has to be strong enough to withstand a regular wind, normal wind. That's considered. Now, if it does damage, even though you protected it, so Rabbi Yehuda's opinion was that it makes a difference between if it's a tam or a muad. If it's a muad, then you're exempt because you protected it properly, and if it's a tam, then you're chayiv, which is very counterintuitive. It's exactly the opposite of what you would have thought. You would have thought that the tam is going to be pater. In the muad, it damages. You have to protect it even better. But Rabbi Yehuda says the opposite. He bases it on a pasuk that the tam, for some reason, needs a stronger protection than the muad. So Gemara says, "Well, you asked me a question over here that the tam the perpetrator now has to deal with the carcass, and that's stricter than by a muad." We find this all the time. Rabbi Yehuda says a tam is stricter than a muad. Tam chayiv muad pater. In such a case where you did a regular watching, you guarded it by a regular door, we say that a tam is still going to be chayiv because you needed even a better watching for a tam, and the muad is pater. The logic of this, just to help you swallow it, is the logic could be that maybe by the muad, when someone sees a muad hanging around, then you should know to move your stuff away. You see, it's a wild driver.
Because it feels like it should be the other way around.
It should be the other way around. But by the time I was supposed to know, it's such a tame, docile animal. It was going to come and ram the thing. That's why it's all the onus of guarding it is all on the owner of the tam. Versus by the muad, maybe it puts it over. That's just a little logic that you can put in there. However, Rabbi Yehuda says tam chayim muad pater. We see that Rabbi Yehuda could be stricter over a tam. No, the Gemara says that's only where Rabbi Yehuda is talking about guarding it. He has a verse that says that a tam needs to be guarded more than the muad. But when it comes to payment, is it possible that it's going to come out that he's going to end up with a loss, an extra loss, because it's a tam which he wouldn't have had if it would be a muad. But Tanya, but it's taught in a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Yochel shoshav emana shenagach shoshav chamish slime." Let's say I have an ox that's worth 100 coins, $100 ox, and it gores an ox that's worth 20 coins. Chamish sela. Every sela is 4 zuz. So 5 sela would mean it's 20 zuz. So we're talking about a mana is 100, and a 5 sela is 20. So this is like a Rolls Royce that hits a Toyota Corolla, and Banavela Yafasela, this Toyota Corolla, this Nevela now, it's only worth not 20, it's now only worth 4. 1 sela. This one takes half the Rolls Royce and half the Toyota Corolla. This one takes half the Rolls Royce, half the Toyota Corolla. So what comes out is each one gained. Just for a second. This guy has 52 and this guy has 52, right? No, only the mace is total. Yeah, the 20 is total. Well, it's not total. It still has a value of 4. So Amrit, we say like this. What is a muad different? Is a muad different because to be more strict or to be more lenient? It's to be more strict, the muad, right? The muad only pays with the damage, doesn't pay extra. Don't put a penalty on him. He only pays exactly the damage. What's the damage? Damage over here was 16, exactly. So tamakal, the tam that's more lenient, like kolshkein, is it not a kal v'chaymer that he should only pay 16? Over here, he comes out, he pays 50. 48. Yeah, because he gets 2. And I guess half the carcass. Okay, so now what we're seeing now is that Rabbi Yehuda holds that when it comes to payment, the tam needs to be more lenient, not more strict. What would come out according to the way we were putting it was that, let's say the carcass is worth a lot, but then it gets worth less. So there could be a huge loss for the perpetrator of the carcass, even though it's not his, it's the other guy's. But Rabbi Yehuda says no, it is his. So it could be a huge loss. Okay. Elam Rabbi Yechanan says instead of saying chas nevela is the difference between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, it's really shvach nevela. If the carcass gets worth more afterwards, for some reason, this dog meat becomes very expensive. Special. They just said that dogs are supposed to eat special organic meat that's specifically been gored by an ox in the street. So, the Marsavar, this master holds, which is referring to Reb Meir, the Nizikavi. He says that just belongs to the victim, right? If it gets worth more, he earns that increase. Marsavar, Rabbi Yehuda would say Palga, say that it's half and half. Find it the Kashlei Rabbi Yehuda, and this is where Rabbi Yehuda had a question. Take a look at this. The Shakal B'Shvacha. Now that you're saying that the Torah is concerned about the perpetrator, that he takes part of the increase, when the carcass gets worth more, he actually makes a little money on this. Yachol, is it possible the following? Let's say I have an ox that's only worth 20 coins, a Toyota Corolla. Gores a Rolls Royce. And the carcass is worth 50. So there's a loss of 50 here. This one takes half of the living one. How much was the living one? 20. Each one takes half, which each one gets 10. And half of the carcass. How much was the carcass? The Rolls Royce that's now only worth 50. Each one gets 25. So they walk away in each with 35. Maybe we should say this one started with 20. This guy started with 100. And when we're done, each one walks away with 35. Is that possible? That he's going to end up making more than he lost. Amrit, we say like this. How could it be that the perpetrator ends up with more money? Not he makes more than he lost. The perpetrator makes more than his damage. His damage was 50, and he ends up with, he only had 20 in the beginning. Now he ends up with 35. He gains 15 out of this.
Because he hit a Rolls Royce.
Because he hit a Rolls Royce. She said, this guy is making money. We have a pasuk. The owner of the ox is supposed to pay, not take. Right?
The owner of the.
They got it wrong. Like in Sedaim, some type of, remember that those things. Remember the Medrash about Sedaim? It was someone threw Eliezer, Avram's servant, went to Sedaim. Someone threw a rock, it hit him in the head, he was bleeding. So he goes to court. He says, this guy threw a rock at me, you should pay for damage, whatever. So the guy says, no, I was doing bloodletting, you should pay me. You have to pay. So Eliezer takes out a rock and he hits the judge. She says, you just pay it directly to the guy.
Oh, wow.
If they, I guess Sedaim allows that, you owe me, so pay it to him. Okay, so my vaimer, why do we need an extra pasuk? If you say the nizik, you see over here the nizik is actually losing out. How much is the nizik losing out over here? The nizik had an ox that was worth 100. He's now ending up with, instead of getting 50 coins, he's getting only 35. So there's a pseida the nizik. Abel hechad like a pseida nizik, but maybe if there's no loss to the nizik, for example, Kagain, let's say they were each worth 20, but it got worth more after it got damaged. It actually gets worth more. That Toyota Corolla now was in this accident. Some reason it's in a shape exactly from some car that's whatever, that this got worth more, some animal meat. So now it's worth 30. So Shleishim says, so shakal nami mazik b'shvacha. I could have thought that maybe now that it's worth more, the fact that the damager each take half. So the nizik is not losing out. The victim is not losing out. He's getting for sure half of his loss. He's getting 20. He's getting 10 from the each getting 35 now, right? He's getting 10 plus 15. So I could think that maybe over there it's not a problem. So I quote the pasuk to tell me that even in a case where the victim's not losing, we never let the perpetrator gain. Okay. Amalei Ravacha bar Tachlifa l'Rava. Ravacha bar Tachlifa says to Rava, according to this, Ramesh, you mentioned this. The Tam may end up paying more than Chatzinezek, but the case would be like this. Let's say I have an ox that's worth 50, that goes an ox that's worth 40. The loss is 20. What I'll do is I'll divide the loss, 20. Well, I'll divide the victim ox, which is 20 also because it was 40, now 20. So I divide that, and they each have 10. Okay, that would have been the Chatzinezek. Now I take the perpetrating ox, the 50, and I divide that into 25 because it was started off with 50, now it's 25. So now they're each getting 35. And what comes out here is that the mazik is not gaining. The victim is not losing. Mazik is not gaining because he's losing 15. He started with 50. The victim that had an ox that was worth 40 still is getting 35. He's not losing. In our other cases, the victim had an ox that was worth more, and now this, and now he's losing out. The mazik is gaining. Over here, I don't have the mazik gaining. I don't have the nizik losing. I don't have the perpetrator gaining more than he started with, and I don't have the nizik losing more than half. But he is getting more. He is getting more than half of the damage. So we're asking, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it comes out he gets more than half the damage. The Gemara says, "Isli Rabbi the pras shepachsu misa machtzim b'chai." Does Rabbi Yehuda holds also that can't be, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that you can only really get half of the damage. You can't get more than half of the damage when it comes to a tam. Minole, where does he know this from? We quote the pasuk that Rameir had, that the difference in cost between when it was alive and the difference between when it's dead, that gets divided by the living animal. Says 1 second. You're shifting the whole thing. You're switching this. Rabbi Yehuda said before that you have to cut them both in half and they each take half of each. Okay, and if so, nichtiv kra, let the pasuk say vesames. Why does it say my begam? And also, shma min atarti, we're learning from this two things. First of all, that you only pay half and not more than half. And also that if it does get worth more, the perpetrator also is a partner in the carcass and he gains some of that increase. So you get two things from this. You do the next Mishnah and let me leave the next
So
Mishnah.
what happened in that case? It's 35-35. That's okay. Conclusion.
Yeah, no, it's not. That's not the conclusion. In that case, he's going to get only $10 coins out of the 50.
Out of the 50.
Yeah.
Because that was the half.
That's half of it. So they had this riddle. They asked me if someone has, he's supposed to take a pill for his heart and a pill for his liver every day, and he has 4 pills left. He's supposed to take only 2, but they got mixed up. What should he do?
You cut out all of them.
Very good. Shalom says you cut all of them in half, and then you automatically have your 2 pills. Because there's 4 pills there. So you might end up taking 2. You might end up taking 2 for the heart instead of 1 for the heart, 1 for the liver, whatever. But if you cut them all in half, then you automatically have 1 for the heart, 1 for the.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 pills. Okay, 4 pills. Yeah, I need this one and this one. I need this one and this one, but I don't know which one is which. So this is for today. This is for tomorrow. So what should I do? So if you cut all 4 in half, then automatically I have a half of a heart, half of a liver, half of a heart, half of a liver. So automatically, which means I have 1 of each. I shouldn't use my fingers for that example, but okay. We'll go back. You get that? Yeah, and now you have a riddle for the Hanukkah for the kids.
I know it differently.
Sure, something another answer.